Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this virtual professional development opportunity. My name is Joe Schmidt, and I'm the Social Studies Specialist for the Maine Department of Education. Today, I am happy and excited, and we are very lucky to welcome the dynamic trio from the Lou Frey Institute in Florida, based out of the University of Central Florida. And they're going to be talking about their civics in real life resources and other things that you can be using to teach both online and in-person instruction related to civics education. So at this point, I will turn it over to them and let them all introduce themselves.
Fantastic. Thank you, Joe. Let's go ahead and get started here. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us for Civics in Real Life. Joe, can everybody see the screen? I'm going to take that as a yes.
I do not.
I do not see it, Steve.
Okay,
Sorry.
I might just click up. Here we go. I apologize. And now you can see the screen.
There it is.
All right, fantastic. All right. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us for Civics in Real Life, Resources for Virtual Instruction, brought to you by the Lou Frey Institute and the Florida Joint Center for Citizenship. And please don't let the regional name fool you. We have a number of online resources where you can find us, and our resources, while they are aligned with Florida standards and benchmarks, the content is applicable across the country. We have two main websites, floridacitizen.org and the loufreyinstitute.org. Our content site, which you'll see today, is civics360.org. We have a blog, floridacitizens.wordpress.com, and we are on Facebook, as you can see there, and we are on Twitter, and we are pretty active on that. We're also at Lou Frey Institute on Twitter. I am Steve Maceda. I'm the Interim Executive Director of the Lou Frey Institute, and I am a New Englander by blood and by pride. I actually was born and raised in the great state of Massachusetts, but I did spend 5 years of my youth in Scarborough and in South Portland. So happy to be here talking with folks in Maine today. And I am joined by my two colleagues here. Want to go ahead and introduce yourselves, Val?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Val McVeigh. I am the Interim Associate Director for the Institute, as well as the Director of Curriculum. It's great to be here today.
And I'm Chris Spinelli. I'm the Institute's Action Civics Coordinator. And like Steve, I too am a New Englander and lived most of my early life in Massachusetts as well. So it's great to be here. Thanks for having us.
Because as we all know, there are very few native Floridians apparently, and we're all from somewhere else. So happy to be here talking with you today. And I think we're going to begin sort of our discussion by really asking you to think about this particular question. How often do you discuss current events in your daily instruction? At least once a week, at least once a month, at least once a year, or unfortunately, you don't get to do current events. And Val and Chris, if you just sort of monitor the chat, we can sort of share some feedback on that, because this really gets to the core of why we develop civics in real life.
So we've gotten a couple A's so far, so at least once a week is what we're hearing.
Excellent, and that's great to hear. And certainly we've been pretty busy with current events here in the past few weeks. I will tell you that, those of you that say you're hearing it once a week, from what we're seeing, that's not always the case in many states across the country, where teachers it may be even forbidden from discussing current events in their classroom. And so this brings us to our resources and how we use them and why they were developed. And Val, you want to discuss all this a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to give you a little bit of context about who we are, the Lou Frey Institute has been working in the civic education space since around 2005. So for over the past 15 years, we've been working to develop quality curriculum resources and professional development to support really K-12 students and teachers throughout Florida, but more recently to a national audience. And this data snapshot is really just a summary of the impact that our middle school lesson plans have in preparing students for the Florida middle school end of course civics assessment. And then this slide gives you an overview of all of the resources we have K-12. And today, obviously, we're going to focus on civics in real life. You can see that at the bottom of your screen. And that really is appropriate for middle school or high school, as you'll see later on. But we really try and provide comprehensive civics resources K-12. We start in kindergarten through our series, Civics in a Snap. We have comprehensive lesson plans for middle school called the Applied Civics Lesson Plans. And then we have a variety of resources to serve our high school students. And this is the homepage where you can find everything. And you'll hear this a few times this afternoon, but everything that we offer is free. And you just need to create a quick login to access all of the resources we've got.
Except for civics in real life. You do not need a login to actually access civics in real life. We thought it was so important and so useful. We didn't want necessarily to have to put an obstacle, even any potential obstacle in the way. But for our lesson plans, our videos there, you do need to register for that. But everything we offer is, of course, 100% free. Okay, thanks, Val. So really thinking about this next question, I'd love to hear how you approach current events in your classroom. And, you know, I'm a big Twitter follower, and I found this tweet from a couple of years ago. And I think Mr. Ben Lewis here makes a really great point. I firmly believe that it's my moral responsibility to deliver unbiased accounts of world events daily. Such a huge deal to me. And that as a social studies educator, as a teacher, it really is our responsibility to find ways to help our students make sense of the world and what's going on around them. So those of you that do talk about current events in your classroom, how do you actually approach current events with your kids? Just go ahead and respond in the chat. I know you're all typing fervently away.
Well, and I think while people are thinking about their responses, some of the responses we've heard in the past is that we know that people watch CNN Student News and lead to some discussion, or they pull articles from Newsella, News ELA, and do some discussions. We've got Lauren shared that they do image analysis, leading to hypothesis and then digging deeper into questions. And then Deborah shared they do Fridays. They share questions and readings, and they watch CNN 10, and she's also used Newsella.
Fantastic. And again, pretty common approaches there. CNN 10 seems very popular. And, you know, Newsella, I'm a huge fan of, although I will, the Polish side of me must admit that it took me forever to realize that Newsella actually meant News ELA. Not exactly, that's the Polish side of me coming out there a little bit. But excellent ways to think about current events in our class, and again, connecting it to what really matters for our kids. But one of the things that research has found is that teaching current events is hard, and we know this. Only 46% of social studies teachers think they get strong support from their principal to teach about an election. 38% believe their districts would strongly support them, and 28% think parents would do the same. And I suspect it's probably something you've seen in your own classrooms. And I suspect, Joe, you've probably seen this at the state level as well, probably hearing from folks on this. So I have some examples on the screen here. What other obstacles exist to teaching current events effectively? And, you know, the research has sort of identified a number of areas, and you may or may not agree with these. And as we're sort of discussing these, please feel free to jump in the chat and put in anything else that you think of. But certainly framing issues with younger students can be a concern. Making the content digestible. How do you take these big events and break them down for the kids? Adequate background knowledge is also often an issue, not just for the kids, but for our teachers, particularly for our elementary teachers who are fantastic, but they may not always have necessarily the background knowledge on specific content areas that potentially the high school teachers might have. But all of us as educators have areas where, we might not feel comfortable talking about this because we don't have the background knowledge to give it justice. And connecting everything back to classroom instruction or standards is often an issue. One of the things we stress for our teachers here in Florida, because we have a great deal of resistance in some cases, the teaching about current events, is if you can connect everything back to our state standards, then you should feel comfortable and safe in talking about it. And as we move forward, any other obstacles that exist, please feel free to drop them in the chat. Val or Chris, any additional thoughts on what we've heard so far?
Well, I think another issue that we've seen certainly more recently is the issue of bias and concerns from not only teachers, but also parents in talking about current issues and, what types of bias or perspectives are going to be brought into the classroom. So I think teachers get nervous and administrators get nervous about talking about what's happening in the news for fear of being biased.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that. It's like Deborah agrees with that. Even when teachers think they aren't being biased, that's a perception of bias. I think, for example, you guys may have seen this viral video where a parent was recorded herself ranting at a teacher who did the apparently biased activity of having students color an electoral college map. And the parent said that was biased because it implied that Biden had won the election. And so I know that, even things that we wouldn't think would be an issue. Jay Mooney says, I remember even Time for Kids was at times tough content. There's some background references younger students weren't ready for, and that's a great point. And think about, for example, what kind of background is necessary to talk about what happened last week, right? And what's really necessary for that. That background knowledge is definitely a challenge. And so this is why we developed our new resource, which we believe you'll find useful, Civics in Real Life. This is a resource standard developed very weekly. We update it every week, essentially beginning in late July, early August, and carrying it all the way through the end of June. And it's posted on floridacitizen.org and shared across our social media. Every single Civics in Real Life is one page. It's a downloadable PDF with content, activities, and links. We'll break this down for you. And what it does is it connects current events to civic concepts and/or skills. And it also gets to that background knowledge. It provides some of that background knowledge and approaches it with the assumption that you might not have a background understanding of some of what's being addressed. They're written at a middle school reading level, but they are usable for grades 3 through 12. But what's most important and why we're sort of pushing it outside of 4 is state benchmarks and standards can be aligned, but they're not included. We particularly did not include state benchmarks and standards so you could feel comfortable using it with your classroom. And so we can say, why are you using this from Florida? Well, it's not aligned to Florida standards. It's really content and concept oriented, not standards driven, which I know is a heretical phrase not to say these days. But in this case, it's really about the concepts and the content. And on Civics in Real Life, you can see our most recent one is actually Inauguration Day, posted yesterday. We have been going all the way back through late March of last year. And essentially, topics in the news. You can see, for example, we did Inauguration Day. We did one on impeachment, the 25th Amendment, sedition, to get to the fact of why the election in Georgia mattered, controlling the chambers. The runoff elections example. And we have a number of other options that we'll take a look at. But again, these are all available on Florida Citizen. Okay. And I went through and took a look at the main learning results connections and really how civics in real life could align to Maine's enduring themes. And just some examples that can connect to some of these themes. We have voting rights for freedom and justice. We have civil disobedience in the First Amendment for conflict and compromise. We have tribal sovereignty and the National Day of Service and Remembrance for unity and diversity. For technology and innovation, we have the Food and Drug Administration and the U.S. Postal Service. For continuity and change over time, we have consent to the governed, political party platforms, presidential transitions. For supply and demand, we have the Defense Production Act and tariffs. Okay, and we also took a look at some of your overall state standards. And you can see that we really did try to make some obvious connections. Again, we aren't experts on Maine standards. We left that to Joe. But sort of some connections that we see here going with some of your elementary and your upper grade level standards here as well. You can see some of the connections here for the state standards. Whether it's federalism and the CARES Act for the Civics and Government 1, whether it's natural rights and Veterans Day for Civics and Government 2, or one of my favorites, or one we did on George Washington's Thanksgiving, or again, the one on tribal sovereignty for Civics and Government 3. And just a sample topic list so far that we have. You can see some examples there on the screen. And again, some of the more recent ones. Depending on events, these are again updated once a week. We put a new one up generally every Tuesday or Wednesday every week. However, if circumstances require it, like what happened last week or a week before, we will put more than one up a week. As we put, for example, right after the events of the Capitol, we put up one on sedition and the 25th Amendment. Followed that up with impeachment. Again, and these are not written with any particular bias in mind. They're very much cut and when I say cut and dry, I don't mean they're boring, but in that it's basically a sort of Joe Friday dragnet approach, just the facts, right? And so what we're gonna do now is we're gonna spend a few minutes just breaking down what a civics in real life looks like, all right? And then we'll talk about really how we can use it in the classroom. But every civics in real life is going to have sort of the same structure and look the same. All right, and we're going to use our inauguration day CRL, which Joe may have shared with you already, as we sort of break this down. So the title of the civics in real life is always focused on a civics concept or relate to a current event. And you see just some examples there, some of them connecting to current events, some of them connecting to concepts, some of them connecting to both. All right, and each one's going to have a logo of some kind that can sort of give you some sense of what area it might actually be tied to. All right, so in our civics in real life, the opening paragraph always connects the current event to a big idea, civics concept, or need to know. Why are you learning about this? Why are you talking about this in class? What's the connection that you're making here? Every civics in real life will have at least 2 images or graphics that relate to the content in some way. Again, knowing that students need stuff to break up the text and also allows you to have sort of jumping off points for additional discussions by using some of these images. Okay? And in most cases, these images will have hyperlinks as well. Speaking of hyperlinks, every CRL will connect to relevant primary or secondary sources to expand understanding. All right, so the PDF will have embedded primary sources or secondary sources in them that will take you to sort of more understanding, to get to that background knowledge building that we know is always a concern for students and for teachers, and allow you to maybe even dive a little deeper and go a little further than you might otherwise. Every CRL is also going to have a to think and to do. And this is going to ask students to do something with what they learned. For example, for the inauguration day today, we asked students to watch or listen to the inaugural address today and really think about the question, how does a newly inaugurated president lay out their vision for our government, and how does it reflect the goals and purposes of government as provided in the preamble to the Constitution? All right, and that preamble to the Constitution actually links back to another civics in real life that we did on the preamble to the Constitution. Okay. And then we have a learn more section, which will provide more information or extensions to what was addressed in the Civics in Real Life resource. So we really try to embed a number of links and additional resources that you might find useful. And here's our next slide is just sort of an overview and just some examples of some of the ones that you'll find on the Florida Citizen website. Okay, and so again, you can see that they all really reflect the same structure. Okay. And some of the breakdowns, some examples, some of the concepts that we saw covered in impeachment edition, two of our more recent ones. Okay, and so for today's discussion, we're going to talk about using Inauguration Day in conjunction with another resource we have called Civics 360. But what I'd like you to really think about right now is how you might actually use civics in real life from what you've seen so far for virtual or face-to-face instruction. So I'd love to sort of type your thinking in the chat box as I sort of go over some possibilities, some connections here in the next couple of slides. So please feel free to leave your comments, leave your thoughts, leave your thinking based on what you've seen so far. And of course, any questions that you might have. So one of the ways, again, we've talked with teachers about some of this. This is from our Facebook page, is connecting the CRLs to current instruction aligned with state standards. You can see some of the feedback that we've gotten. The one that's being referenced here, a couple of the ones are being referenced here. One about using it to citizens engage with their government leaders has to do with the First Amendment. And then the next one had to do with one we did on international organizations. And you see they aligned it with the RISE Civics assignment for that. Applying it to real life. And the name of the series, of course, is Civics in Real Life. Basically, this teacher actually using it to sort of wrap up their content and show how it applies outside the classroom. Another one had to do with, again, communication that we had, and the teacher trying to help students make connections with that. Okay, and again, just some examples for the Inauguration Day, Civics in Real Life. It could work for unity and diversity, continuity and change over time, democratic and constitutional principles of government, the American political system, or primary sources with our kids. But I'd love you to sort of take a minute and think about what are some additional ways you might actually use this with your kids. And please, Val and Chris, if you have any additional thoughts.
One comment that Deborah shared is that they look well designed and easy to follow. And thank you, Deborah. And that was certainly intentional. We have designed them so that they really do all look the same. And so that if you've seen one, you get the sense of the structure, and then you can download any of them and you're going to get the same structure.
Exactly. And again, the idea being that it makes it easier for teachers to use, makes it easier for students to use as well. The students know what they'll be seeing, teachers know what they'll be seeing. And with the concepts and the content too, just to emphasize, we are open to ideas, open to suggestions. Again, trying to write one of these a week, sometimes we have to, try to guess what folks might want, but we're always open to new ideas. For example, looks like we may be doing one on gerrymandering and redistricting here soon based on a request from teachers. So we'd love to hear your thoughts on, what might be some that your students might find useful. What might be some, from this at you, Joe, what might be some that might be useful for folks in Maine in particular that you could use with your teachers and your students? Because we really want to meet the needs of everyone that is actually using these. And so we have another poll question we'd like you to think about. What are some of the most difficult civics topics for you to teach? Election 2020, local issues, federalism, domestic and foreign policy. Again, these first four going on our experiences here with teachers in Florida, or others. So, just in the chat box, if you would, what did you see as perhaps the most difficult civics topics for you to teach?
And Steve, while we wait for those responses, one of the ways in which they can be used, and one of the more popular ways, is for them to be used as bell ringer activities for classroom instruction, and really introducing students to those topics. And one of the comments was that with the consistency of the design and being a single page, it's not overwhelming for that reluctant student. And I completely agree. I mean, it definitely helps draw them in so that they begin to understand that this material really is digestible, especially in such an introductory way.
Exactly. Exactly. All right, well, we'll go ahead and we'll continue on. And if something occurs to you, please feel free to drop it in the chat box. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Chris now. That's going to talk about another of our free resources that can be connected to civics in real life. And this is civics360.org. So Chris, sir, the floor is yours.
Well, thanks, Steve. I appreciate it. So to help support our Civics in Real Life resource, we do have Civics 360, and it is our comprehensive guide to civics. So let's go ahead, dive in, and take a look. When we take a look at Civics 360, the registration is free and access is simple. And when you access the page, there will be 3 levels of sign up. We have them for student, teacher, and other. And, because we want to make sure that we are very responsive. If you end up having questions on registration, go ahead, contact Steve. We'll make sure that we have his email in the chat box. I know it's in other places in the presentation as well, but this really is a good way of utilizing and expanding on the ideas contained in Civics 360. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the things that you might see once you get logged in. So when you're logged in, this is part of what you'll see. And you'll notice that there are several topic areas that are supported by specific content topics. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at these in greater detail.
And before we jump into sort of each of the specific topic areas, the numbers you see, the codes you see there obviously are connected to Florida benchmarks. Florida does have high stakes assessment, which is this is originally developed for. But the reason we put both the benchmark and the specific content is so that you could feel comfortable knowing what would be covered in that particular section. So you don't have to necessarily stress about, well, this is for Florida, not for me.
Right. Great point, Steve. And, the idea that these topics are, truly universal for civics. So even though they, may be identified specifically for Florida, we certainly know that they would be applicable to topics that are covered under the main standards and benchmarks. But as you can see, we have 9 topic areas, and as we shared, each is supported by specific content topics. So if you take a look at Citizen U, you can see some of the subtopics, citizenship, the naturalization process, the 14th Amendment. And so each of these specific content topics identified helps to support student understanding of the broader topic area. And as Steve pointed out when he was discussing the civics in real life, to help make the connections to these topics clearer, what we've done is we've tried to use similar image icons so that you get an idea of, if I use this civic in real life, it would go with this topic area found within Civics 360. So when we take a look then at, and Steve, if you go ahead, go to the next slide.
Yeah, it's showing me that my screen sharing is paused. Here we go. Sorry, I apologize.
Nope, you're good. No worries.
Okay.
So when we go ahead and we take a look at one of these broader topic areas, you can see how we've broken it down into the highlighted subtopics. And so the goal here is for students to understand these smaller parts and how together they help with understanding the bigger picture that, again, is that topic area. And again, as Steve shared, go ahead and ignore those codes because, they are specific to Florida. But again, the topics themselves are universal. So we know that these ideas are certainly applicable to things that students in Maine are learning as far as, government and civics are concerned. When we take a look at what's included in each module, you'll find that there are videos that contain video viewing guides. We also have readings and reading guides that help support the watching of the videos. We've also included support and enrichment activities. We have assessment activities as well as additional resources. So we'll go ahead and we'll talk about each of these in some detail. So when we look at each module, what we're going to do today is we're going to look at evaluating the candidates module. And this can be used in support of the civics and real life topics that are related to the inauguration, elections. We have one on battleground states, political party platforms, and there are several others. And so together we can use these to help students grasp the civic content and concepts that is so important to the understanding of the current events. And really, if we think about it, with today's inauguration and driving into that idea of evaluating candidates, this really is sort of the culmination of the evaluation of the candidates, right? Because if the candidate gets to this point, they really, drummed up a majority of the support so that they could go ahead and, in this instance, win the presidency. So every module has at least one video, okay? And to accompany it, we have created a video viewing guide, and you can see that identified by the blue arrow. And these video guides are available in both a Word version and a typable PDF. So if you're teaching on a hybrid model or you're completely remote, this is a great option for students learning. We also have a closed captioning feature that is accompanying the video narration, but we do recommend that you use the scripts that are also included because the closed captions are auto-generated and they can create some interesting translations. So let's go ahead and take a look at one of the videos, and this is again from evaluating candidates. So go ahead, play that video, Steve, please.
Trying to pull it up. Give me a moment.
Sure.
I apologize for the delay. The Zoom spot is an issue. There we go. All right. All right. Do you see the Civics 360 screen?
We do.
Okay.
On election day, voters are handed a ballot that usually includes more than one contest. Oftentimes, citizens cast their vote in races for federal, state, and local offices. For each race, there is a list of candidates. Candidates are people running for a specific office. In this video series, we will learn about the requirements of candidates running for political office. Additionally, we will look at ways voters can evaluate or judge candidates running for office. In general, official requirements to run for political office can be sorted into several categories: age, citizenship, residency, or where someone lives, and term limits, which is how many terms a person can hold the same office. After watching this video, you will be able to 1. Identify the requirements to run for federal offices. 2. List some ways to evaluate a candidate running for office. Let's get started. The requirements to run for federal or national political offices, president, U.S. Senator, and U.S. Representative, are outlined in the United States Constitution.
Okay. All right. So that is just an example of what we see with the video. And let me go ahead and get back to the PowerPoint.
Sure. Yeah, no. Well, and one of the things that you'll see, and as soon as Steve pulls this up, we're just going to connect this back to those video viewing guides, because had the video played just a little bit longer, one of the things that you would have seen is that discussion questions are built in for students to reflect on what they've learned as they watch the video, and we reiterate these questions in the video viewing guides. And the reason we took this approach to teaching the content is because we wanted to be purposeful for helping your students learn civics. So Steve, if you could go ahead and switch to the next slide.
Okay, and you guys can see the PowerPoint, right?
Yep, we can see the PowerPoint.
Super.
Yep. So this is what the video viewing guide looks like. And so these are the kinds of questions and actually are the questions that are included in the video. But again, we wanted to create these guides for students so they could go ahead and follow along, but it does, help you approach your instruction with that designated purpose of really helping the students understand, as you convey the information to them.
And these are in both PDF and Word form, and we included Word so you can actually adapt or edit, easily adapt or edit the viewing guide as you need.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. So we also have reading guides that are available, and we develop these to accompany student learning as well. We have them available in English, Spanish, and Haitian Creole. And they're designed at a 7th grade level, but they can certainly be used in a high school level as well. All reading guides include academic and content vocabulary that emphasizes the most important concepts in the content. And and actually what you're looking at now is, what the guide looks like. So you can see the questions students are asked to address, how they help students think about the most important content. And like the video guides, the reading guides also allow for edits. So they are editable. You can download them as the PDF or, the typable PDF. And because we wanted to be sure these guides were structured and scaffolded appropriately to support student reading, we did develop these in collaboration with reading experts here at the University of Central Florida. So what you see here is what the research suggests is going to improve student reading and comprehension as you help them dive into your content. So then, how can we use the readings and videos in conjunctions with the CRL? And so, you can, use them to introduce, the broader content covered in the readings and the videos. You can have students make the connections between the content that they've learned in the readings and the videos with, the civics in real life that, you choose. You can make vocabulary connections. And so really in the end, if you think about it this way, civics in real life is truly the hook. And Civics 360 is the deep dive of the issues and the topics that are covered. So that, you're really creating this well-rounded set of instruction, for your students so that they're going to be able to walk away having a firm understanding of these sometimes difficult topics. We also have assessments and additional resources, built in. So we provide opportunities for student formative and summative assessments that, are designed to help guide students on what they learned. For example, when students engage, in quizzes, if for some reason they select a wrong answer, we give them an additional chance at answering, but we explain why what they selected was wrong so that it, helps guide their thinking even further. Our vocabulary tools include concept circles and Quizlet, as well as some other interactive lessons. And so we tried to provide as much as possible to support that virtual civic learning. And so at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it back over to Steve because there's some additional resources that are included in Civics 360 that he'll be walking you through.
Sure. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that overview. And please, again, folks, if you have any questions or comments, please shoot them in the chat box and we'll be sure to address them at the end of our presentation today. But some of the modules, not all of them, but some of them do have a couple of additional classroom resources. What we've done, one thing to remember is that we do have lesson plans. We have 35 different lesson plans on our website for civics content. And so one of the things we've done is we've gone through those and we've pulled out some of the activities from those and we've put some of those into Civics 360. And that can serve as a standalone activity that can go with both the civics in real life that students read and the content that they're learning in Civics 360. So this is what you'd see if that is available for that module. It's the showing what you know section. It really uses at the end of the lesson. We also have, thanks to a small grant we did, we worked with some teachers here in Florida, in Orange County, to actually develop some lessons and activities, readings and activities that let you go deeper with your kids or go further with your kids, or even just provide them with stronger supports. You can see here, for example, for the Civics 360 module on the Articles of Confederation and really the founding. You can see that we created both readings for this, additional readings for the students, and activities that let you sort of match the content or let you play with primary sources. And this is sort of what you'd see here, very similar format across all of our stuff. We try to be very consistent in that. And so you can see, you know, one of the things we've done with the Shays Rebellion, for example, is we created, the teachers created a sort of a more organized chart for students, integrated better graphics that could be used for this, and simplified some of the language even more than what we already had. And you can see we also have an activity here for the U.S. Constitution and matchup activity relating to the Articles of Confederation, giving you instructions on how to actually use it and providing you with all the materials and resources you need. And of course, we do have answer keys available as well. Okay, and two important additional resources you'll find on Civics 360 is entire practice assessment. And we have a hard copy of that available as well. You can just email me for. But we also have an entire course series called the High School U.S. Government Classroom. And this module series, the High School U.S. Government Classroom, really aligns with the National Civics Assessment, the naturalization test. Because I know that many states, I'm not sure how it is in Maine, but many states are pushing for that. In Florida, we have a version of that we developed this for, but it really provides sort of a basic foundation for civic literacy for high school U.S. government that you might find of interest, and it's set up in a very similar manner to our other Civics 360 materials. All the videos that are available on Civics 360 for every single module, you can find on SchoolTube, which is a free service. If you actually register for it, though, it actually allows you to embed questions with viewing the video and a number of other things. So if you go to SchoolTube and do a search for Civics 360, all one phrase, you'll find our, I believe, 10 channels that we have, 11 channels, excuse me, 9 for Civics 360, one for government, and one for our new webinar series. So if you go to SchoolTube, you can find all our videos there. And so putting this all together, really thinking about how we can actually use Civics 360 in conjunction with Civics in Real Life to help our students succeed. Ultimately, thinking about connections between the reading, and Chris sort of touched on it earlier, connections between the readings and the Civics in Real Life itself, and connecting the content, connecting the vocabulary, and using them again as a jumping off point for helping students understand. And again, with the Evaluating a Candidate module for Civics 360, ultimately, when you're evaluating a candidate for office, you're deciding who's going to be standing up there essentially on Inauguration Day, or swearing into the House or the Senate, which is also happening today, for example, for the new senators from Georgia. So really making those connections to some of that content. And so now, any questions that, before we sort of wrap up, any questions that anyone might have? We got a couple more things I do want to share with you. Val or Chris, did you see anything in the chat box?
Yep, we've gotten a couple ideas or thoughts on potential future CRLs. Joe shared, why do Maine and Nebraska award their electoral college partially based on congressional districts? And then the follow-up of, why don't more states split? That could be an interesting Civics in Real Life to tackle. And then Lauren shared that one of her challenges is dealing with misinformation and alternative facts when dealing with democracy and civic engagement. And I think, Lauren, you are definitely not alone. And we have put out, there are resources on Civics 360 related to symbolism, bias, and propaganda that might be useful. And we've done a couple Civics in Real Life on the concept of bias and the concept of, propaganda, which may be useful depending on your context.
And it may be worth, actually, now that I think about it and brought that up, I'm doing a CRL somewhere, something around media literacy and, identifying appropriate sourcing and things like that. So that's definitely a topic area we might consider. And again, we are always open to questions, but we do have a couple more things that we do want to share with you. First, we do have a webinar series, and we have a new one coming up in February that you might find useful. And this is featuring Dr. Scott Waring of the University of Central Florida and Dr. Tina Ellsworth of the University of Kansas, talking about the sources framework for teaching with primary and secondary sources. They're going to look at the practice of blockbusting, which is going to be really fascinating. And of course, the sources framework is connected to the Library of Congress. And so they'll talk about how to actually use that with your students. Big focus here on both pedagogy and content. So you can register at the link you see on the screen, or just shoot any of us an email. And I actually shared with Joe through another organization the flyer for this, and the link is embedded there. I can shoot you the flyer myself as well. We'd love to have you join us for the webinar. And we have two other webinars we've done, one on the COA Election Day riots, which, even though it happened in Florida, you might find useful to talk about the importance of civil rights and voting. And we also did one on the importance of the inauguration last week, which is pretty well attended. And Val, do you want to talk about our online course series?
Sure. So as we mentioned in the beginning, we provide curriculum resources and programs to students, but we also have a number of professional development programs for teachers. And one example being the webinar series that we're doing monthly, but another is the program called the Civics Classroom. This is the Civics Classroom, the US History Classroom, and the Government Classroom are 5-hour online professional development programs that we host on Free for Teachers Canvas. These quick PD programs are open to any teacher, and you can go to the website at floridacitizen.org to learn more, but they essentially take you through just different quick modules related to specific content. So with Government Classroom, it is really a companion to the Government Classroom resources on Civics 360. The high school US History Classroom focuses on the Civil War and Reconstruction. And then the Civics Classroom is actually broken down into 4 separate courses. Preparing to teach civics. There's one on the cognitively complex classroom, dealing with Webb's depth of knowledge, and one about teaching really the basics of the US Constitution, which we developed in partnership with the National Archives.
And that National Archives also helped us develop the Civil War and Reconstruction course as well.
And then we partner with a lot of different organizations, but one of our newest partnership over the last couple of years and has developed in another professional development series is our partnership with IllinoisCivics.org and Mary Ellen Daniels, if you are familiar with her. But we have a grant through the Robert R. McCormick Foundation to develop a series of intensive professional development programs to support the proven practices of civic education. So there was a report that came out, the Guardian of Democracy report, that outlined essentially 6 best practice pedagogies for civics. We have kind of taken those proven practices and run with them and developed an intensive course series around 3 of those strategies: current and controversial issue discussion strategies, simulations of democratic processes, and informed action through service learning. These courses each have 3 different levels. So we are integrating individualized professional learning and digital badges. They take on average 15 hours or so to complete. And similar to our other professional development, we host it on Free for Teachers Canvas. This project is kind of a long-term pilot that we're running, and we're actually in the recruitment process to run a pilot of course 2. which is on simulations of democratic processes. And so we're going to be piloting that course later on next month. So if there's any interest, we are looking for pairs of teachers from different states from around the country, because we have primarily been piloting this with Florida and Illinois teachers. So now we're starting to look to build this nationally, and I will share more information about this with Joe. And Joe, if you've got some teachers in mind, or if you want to pass it along to teachers, we'd love to have some representation from Maine.
Well, I would love to have representation from New England, because we all know that's the best region in the country in any case, right? With the best football team, despite the loss of Mr. Brady. Sorry, bitter. All right. Contact info. Again, my name is Steve. My contact info is there on the screen. Stephen with a PH, proper way to spell it, .maceda@ucf.edu. And then you see Val and Chris as well. And please, if you get any questions about anything you heard today, or anything related to civics, whether you're looking for resources or pedagogical tools or content, or you have ideas for civics in real life, or you have any access issues with any of the resources you saw today, please shoot me an email at any time. I'm always in front of the computer. So love to hear from you. And on behalf of Chris, Val, and the Lou Frey Institute, I really want to thank you for attending today's webinar. And we do hope that you found the materials that we shared today useful. So thank you very much. I really appreciate your time today. Okay.
Well, thank you, Steve, Val, Chris. I will take just a moment to see if anybody has any questions that they would like to pop into the chat or the Q&A at this time. But again, thank you so much, not only for the amazing resources that you produce on a weekly or even multiple times a week that are started to get shared out through the listserv, especially in the past couple of weeks. There's been a lot of real timely resources. It's also amazing the amount of other bigger supporting projects and stuff that you guys are tied to. And so that's why I was so happy and excited to have you all here today to share the work that you are doing. So thank you again for sharing your time and expertise. Is there anybody who has any questions for our presenters?
Doesn't look like it. I appreciate your time, everybody.
Last call. All right, well, one last time, I will give you a formal thank you to the Lou Frey Institute for all that you have done and for sharing your time with us today.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it, everybody. Bye-bye.